Hey everyone, Delphina here. Are you part of the Screen Tones podcast community on Discord? It's an amazing place for webcomic creators of all experience levels to talk about our episodes, share art tips, and co-work. We also have extremely fun activities like regular drawing collaborations and art jams. Visit screentonescast.com and click that friendly Discord icon to join us. Hope to see you there.
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Hello, and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today, we're going to be talking about crowdfunding campaigns, what you need to know, what you need to plan, and how to think about them. I'm Crispy, my pronouns are she, they, and I make the webcomics Ghost Young Sickness and Lunar Blight.
And I'm Delphina. I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Zombulus.
And I'm Verathane. I use she, they pronouns, and I make the webcomics Witchwood and Chiralt.
So, crowdfunding can be used by webcomic artists in a lot of ways, from bringing in large-scale projects to life, getting print runs together, which we talk about in the book printing episode, so check that out. But today we wanted to talk about the planning process, what you should do or avoid along the way to make it work as smoothly as possible, and what kind of things are attractive in a campaign for your readers and what expectations you should have.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of crowdfunding platforms besides Kickstarter. Kickstarter is what I'm familiar with. I think that's what Thane's familiar with. And it's honestly what I've seen be the most successful. Indiegogo is also a solid choice if Kickstarter is not available in your region. And there's a few other platforms out there in rougher stages of development. A couple popped up like in the 2020s where, Kickstarter was briefly flirting with NFT garbage. So a couple of the other ones I know about are Zoop and Crowdfunder and BackerKit's new service. So those are options. Know that in these smaller cases, you will be doing a lot of the legwork and bringing your awareness to the platform and your audience to them. So you're almost always going to raise less money compared to Kickstarter because Kickstarter is more established and has people on there who are looking for comics. So I think that's mostly what we're going to be talking about is Kickstarter here.
100%. And to kind of kick that off, let's begin with some questions. Now, Delphi and Thane, I want to ask you guys, what was planning your crowdfunding campaigns like? Like, how are they structured and how did they actually turn out?
It was definitely a lot of work beforehand, like before even hitting the point of launching the campaign. There's just mostly a lot of it is in the pre-planning and the research. I would always go out of my way to like contact multiple printers about the orders that I was planning to make and kind of start the process of figuring out what my game plan timeline was going to look like over the course of the whole campaign. And I would always try to plan my Kickstarters around the central thesis of like, what's the minimum that I need to make the project happen at all? Like if you order just one copy of a book, it's usually going to be really expensive. So the goal of the campaign is to be able to justify making a larger print order. But what is like the smallest order that will turn in that requires an amount of money that isn't like extravagant that I think I could manage? And then I'll have a plan for how to potentially scale up if I end up with more interest in the campaign than I expected at the very beginning. So once I kind of had a vague idea of the ballpark that I was looking for, it's just a matter of kind of getting started, setting up the Kickstarter draft and figuring out the timeline, like when do I want to launch it? And after the campaign wraps up, how long is fulfillment going to take? Like, what am I going to promise to the people who are jumping in on this thing and trying to support me?
Yeah, the draft thing is so good to use because if you're not familiar with the Kickstarter process, when you click the button to start a campaign, it puts you into draft mode. And you can stay in draft mode for as long as you need to figure out those printer quotes, all the various information that they want about your bank account or whatever. And also to kind of show the preview to your peers to see if everything's reading well, if things make sense. So really take advantage of that time. I think I start a draft almost as soon as I possibly can. As soon as I have the briefest idea of, yeah, I really want to try a Kickstarter for that, I pop open my Kickstarter account and I say I want to make a project. And that puts me into draft mode. And from there, it's just kind of filling in the blanks that they give me. And then when you're at a point where you've taken your time, you put everything in there, you can share a link to ask close friends to see this private preview and just kind of get them to weigh in. Is my goal reasonable? Is the pricing clear and accessible? Similar to Thane, I really try to find the minimum viable quantity and put that as my goal. I try to, make my books kind of at a $25 tier about and some other like little rewards too. But just, kind of pick people's brains and see if everything seems clear and accessible. With any kind of feedback, you might get people asking for plushies or big things that aren't in the cards for you. And that's stuff that you can politely set aside if that's not realistic. But if multiple people are saying the same thing about something catching their eye or being out of their budget or inaccessible to them, that might be a thing to look into modifying.
Yeah, definitely. I love getting peer feedback on any campaign that I run just because it can like draw your attention to things that might be problem areas for once you share it with the general public. When I'm planning out the campaign, another thing that I always think about is how I'm going to market the thing. And as I'm thinking about that, I'll also be thinking about the time frame, like how long is the campaign going to be? Because one thing about Kickstarters or any crowdfunding is that they're really emotionally intensive on the creator because you're going to be thinking about it just constantly and refreshing the page and checking the numbers all the time. And anything you can do to kind of make that process a little more like structured, like when you have to think of new things to say on social media all the time, like planning out like, all right, I'm going to post about it on these dates and I'm going to give myself new things to talk about, like new updates to announce, or like I'm going to add this thing to a tier, or we've just hit like this dollar number and I'm going to tweet the second that we do that. One piece of advice that I heard after I had finished the final Chiralt campaign, which I took into practice when I did a small Kickstarter campaign for chapter 1 of Witchwood, is that I shortened the campaign duration from 30 days to 3 weeks. And part of why I did that is that when you look at like most crowdfunding campaigns, the bulk of the money comes in at the very beginning and at the very end. Like they say you'll make a third of your money within the first week and a third within the last week, and then all the remaining comes in the middle. And honestly, it's even more extreme than that. I feel like a full third comes in like the first 3 days, and then the last third comes in the last 3 days. So shortening that middle period, I don't think actually hurt my campaign. And a big part of what makes Kickstarters so successful is that they have a lot of urgency. Like, this is a limited time offer. And so it really drives people to be like, well, I have to back right now because I can't do it next month. It's going to come down.
Yeah, for the first Spider Force Kickstarter, I accidentally set it to 60 days and I canceled it right away because I'm like, no, we can't do 60 days of this because you lose the urgency.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't even know why that's an option.
I don't know either. I don't think it works out because if I hear I have 2 months to back something, I'm just going to forget about it, honestly. But I did the same thing with my Somnambulist Book 1 Kickstarter. I did 3 weeks because I'm like, if I'm going to have a miserable middle period, I just want it to be 1 week instead of 2. I do think you need that impetus. You do need a little time to get the word out because a lot of times I think if you went 2 weeks, that would be a little too extreme.
I really like that they have the idea to at least cancel it. like you said, if you've launched it accidentally at 60 days. Like, I didn't know that
Yeah.
was a thing. That's
You
really
can
cool.
cancel a campaign anytime, but it's like there as a permanent mark of like funding unsuccessful. I'm like,
Oh
yeah,
no.
it looks kind of bad. And I've asked the Kickstarter staff before if it can be removed because it was just a mistake that it launched that way. And they're like, no, we can't do that. Like,
Oh, sorry about that.
But things can come down for any reason though. Like there was a campaign that I actually backed, like someone that I knew was involved in it, and then they withdrew it after 2 weeks. It was on its way to succeeding, but they had been contacted by a publisher to get the thing
Oh.
made. And so they were like, well, we're not doing it this way anymore. The book is still
oh,
gonna happen.
interesting.
But like they still had the campaign with the backers as kind of like a mailing list. So in theory, if they wanted to, they could still get in touch with those people if they wanted
Yeah.
the new book. But it's not always canceling something doesn't necessarily only happen if it's failing.
Okay, that's good to know though.
Yeah. There's another feature that's actually really good. It didn't always exist in Kickstarter, but they've added it in recent years, and that's the pre-launch page. So when you're getting close to launching your campaign, there's an option to make a pre-launch page so that people can put in their email addresses and just receive an email notification as soon as you launch. This is a really powerful feature because you'll have that link. It's going to be the same link as when you launch the campaign. So you can actually just start promoting earlier. And you're going to be talking about your campaign with a lot of frequency. And so just getting people hyped, getting people knowing that it's coming down will help prevent all those people who just say, oh, you had a Kickstarter? I didn't see any of the 50 posts that you made about it. It's just, yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. I think people feel like they're being annoying. They feel like they're being pushy because you really do have to plan to post every day, at least every other day,
Hmm.
when the campaign launches in some way. There's a lot of little creative ways that you can do it. You can put memes up, or you can take screenshots of the progress bar or whatever. But yeah, you're going to be promoting it a lot. And so just letting people know that it's coming will get that first day really hopping for you.
Something to keep in mind with regards to promotion is that you will see every single post that you make, and that might feel like a lot, but you're seeing them because you're the one making them. And the people who follow you won't necessarily, especially with like the whole algorithm thing, or if they only log in like once a day for
Hmm.
10 minutes, like it's so easy to miss things. So no matter how annoying you think you're being, like probably maybe two of your followers are actually seeing most of your posts and the rest are just catching a handful here and there.
Hmm. Well said. 100%. Yeah. I feel the same about webcomic updates too. So definitely show your readers what you're up to. And I like the pre-launch page idea for that too, because marketing's a huge thing. But we've talked about, kind of revving up to it. So now we're diving into Kickstarter. And I wanted to ask, how do you actually like structure your reward tiers, and what kinds of things like could webcomic creators look into to actually like entice their readers and whatnot to contribute to this campaign?
So when I'm putting together reward tiers or like looking over reward tiers on other campaigns, I generally find that going like with the less is more approach tends to work really well, just because I know, especially when I'm looking at a campaign as a backer, if there's like a ton of tiers that just like keep scrolling down and down and down forever, and they're all like variations on the thing, and it's like you get this thing plus this extra, or you could get this thing plus like A, B, C, and D. Oh, but maybe you want just A and B or B and C. And like having every single variation have a tier to itself can just turn into a lot. Like my brain starts shutting off as I'm scrolling through the page. So I try to stick with like really focusing in on what the main event of the campaign itself is. Like if you're trying to make a book, that book should be like featured in like probably the second or third tier. It's good to have a digital only tier. So absolutely have like an ebook version, and maybe an ebook plus like a wallpaper or something like that. But like don't pad out the tiers before you get to your main attraction, which is like the physical print book. Because if people just keep scrolling, like eventually it gets to be a lot and they might just be like, well, I'll decide later because I'm having trouble choosing now. So sticking to like a very simple approach when it comes to your tiers, having like the book itself, a digital copy of the book, and then maybe some like slightly higher end rewards that you can add on to the book that are easy to produce, like prints. And then maybe if you have the time for it and you're feeling crazy, you can have like a big bucks reward for like 200 or something, which has got like commissions or like something a little fancier. But yeah, I always start with kind of 3 tiers in mind and then start adding things based off of that. But keeping the number down, I think, can help.
Yeah, that's very similar to my approach because I kind of conceive of it like there's 3 types of backers that you're going to be reaching. There's the newcomers who have never read your stuff or heard of you. There's the fans who follow your work already. And there's like 1 or 2 people out there. You never know who they are. I never know who they are until they drop like a bunch of money on my stuff, but they're like your besties who just want to give you a lot of money. So those digital tiers are really good for like getting people involved. They don't have to spend a lot of money to see what you're all about because, they're stumbling onto your work for the first time and they may only want to just grab the PDF or a basic copy of the book. I think this can feel weird if you make a comic that's free to read online or if you already offer a PDF version in your store, but you kind of have to keep in mind that people who are on Kickstarter looking at your campaign right now are not going to take the extra steps to go to your website or go to your store page. So just make it super easy for them to start your comic by offering that PDF. It costs no money. Just a good play. It's a really good starter tier. And then second group, casual fans or maybe more than casual friends, they're going to want the basic reward. They want the book and maybe 1 or 2 extras if they're reasonable and compelling. So I'll usually make a couple tiers around that. I kind of like to focus on like dollar amounts. If I have like 5, 10, 25, 50, 75, 100, and then kind of go up from there. So those are a couple things. I also I think like super fans or very excited friends and family who might want to drop hundreds of dollars on you. They might grab like the highest tier, or sometimes they just choose the no reward option if they just want to give you a lot of general support. In my experience, it's usually not a lot of people, but they will contribute a good percentage to your full goal. So just try to give them an easy option. Again, it's about making it super easy for people to give you money no matter what kind of audience they are, so that they don't have to be like the super fan who's read every single comic and already has all your stuff to like buy the one new thing that you're offering. Just make it easy because I think a lot of people who haven't done Kickstarters before think that they always have to bring their own readers to them, and there is a built-in audience in Kickstarter. Actually, Kickstarter has some pretty good algorithms. They have the Project We Love feature. They have other little features around on their site where completely random people will be finding your comics. So just make that super easy for them to get in.
Yeah, something I do want to mention about some of those, like especially the like slightly esoteric like merch reward, or if you do like anything like commissions, something to keep in mind is that Kickstarter will let you put a limit in place on how many of a certain tier can be sold. And if there's anything that is going to require a lot of extra work from you, or that you're afraid you might actually run out of, like maybe you made like 50 copies of a mini comic 5 years ago and you have 10 copies left and you don't want to print more, but you want to offer them as a reward, you could just make that a tier and have a limit of just 10 copies available. Or like, I think I can only really manage like 15 commissions during the time frame that I've slated for Kickstarter fulfillment. So you can make that a tier and have a little number that will cut people off at a certain point, so you won't end up accidentally committing yourself to like way more work than you really set out for. Related to that, something that's kind of fun that Kickstarter also lets you do is have early bird rewards. which are tiers that will cut off after a certain period of time. So you can have a tier that is only available during the first day of your campaign, and then it's not available anymore. And that can be a really good way to drive people towards your campaign. So some crowdfunders, like Iron Spike Comics, they'll do like an early bird reward, which is the book at a little bit of a discount or with like half cost shipping. And that stops being available during like after the first day. So it won't take a huge chunk out of their overall budget, but it can drive a lot of people to the project in that very beginning window, which is often the most important time for kind of growing a crowdfunding campaign. You can also set it to have a limit of just a certain number of tiers. So if you wanted to be like, well, I've got this like discount or this cool extra award, but it's cutting off at 20, at exactly 20, and then no more people can get on that tier. And that can really drive that like sense of exclusivity and like the limited time offer, which is kind of Kickstarter's big appeal in the first place. Another neat tool that Kickstarter has to offer, which relates to the first point that I was making about keeping the overall number of tiers limited, is that you can make add-ons to your project. So you can say, this is something that I specifically, they rolled out this feature after I had finished the Chiralt campaign. And as soon as it existed, I was like, I wish this had been there while I was running those, because it was a multi-book series. And I was kickstarting them like kind of one book at a time up until the end, when I kickstarted books 4 and 5 at the same time. And I was running into kind of some problems figuring out how to structure my tiers, because it was theoretically possible for somebody to have only book 1 and they want 2, 3, 4, and 5, or they have book 1 and 2 and they want 3, 4, and 5. Or maybe when I kickstarted volume 3, they got volume 3 alone without 1 and 2. What if they want 1, 2, 4, and 5? So making individual tiers for each of those possible combinations of books would just be crazy. Like, you would be scrolling that campaign forever. It would be really repetitive and just bad to look at. So I had to figure out a way to do this via like notes. It was like, send me a message and add to your tier like this amount of money, depending
my
on what part of
God.
the world you live in. And then I'll keep track of it. And when I'm sending out your
No.
book, I'll make sure to add a copy of volume 3 or whatever. Yeah, I had to do all of that like on my, like that was all on my back end. And I
Yeah,
was
they
keeping
didn't
track
have
of
the
it with
tool.
spreadsheets. Yeah, now it exists. Now I can add like right there in the back end, like volume 1 as its own thing and volume 2 as its own thing with like customized shipping. And when a backer goes to like pledge to the campaign, they're like, yes, I want this thing. They'll be taken to a second page, which is like, do you want to add any of these cool add-ons? And then they can pick those other books. But you can also use it for things like pins or funky bookmarks or sticker sheets, or like just a sort of secondary shop front of things that you have available, which backers can pledge to. And I think this is just great. I think it's an amazing tool, and absolutely you should use it if there's like extra stuff that you're like, I want to offer this, but like, how do I make it so that I don't need a million tiers? Like, add-ons are there for you.
Is that something that happens at the end of the campaign, or is the add-ons during the campaign?
It is during the campaign.
What?
Yeah,
That's
as
cool.
if you've seen a campaign and you've pledged to it, and then you get taken to a second page, which is like, are you interested in these add-ons? And you can add them right there, like before the campaign ends. It's as people are pledging.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's kind
that's
of an
so cool.
upsell sort of thing. You
Yeah.
do that and get a little extra money for it. Like, but to Thane's point, you don't have to add a single tier for like your sticker sheets or anything that
Yeah.
was just going to be thrown in the box anyway. Like, it's a great tool if you already have like convention things or whatever that's just like completely random stuff, or if you've done other comics and you want to have like a PDF collection of other short comics that you've done, people could add that too. There's like a lot of possibilities with add-ons. I really am glad they included that functionality.
And the fact that it's going to be all itemized at the end so that you don't have to scroll on paper about what and who got what. Ugh, scary.
I
So
mean,
sorry.
back in the old days, they didn't give you like shipping stuff. Like, you just kind of had to estimate that into your tiers or make like local versus international shipping tier and just hope and pray for the best. Now there's actually like ways that you can say, if I'm shipping to this country, it costs this much. If I'm shipping to that country, it costs that much. And if I'm shipping to the rest of the world, it costs blah. So that's all part of your research part of going to the post office with a sample of your book and or something that weighs about as much as your book is going to weigh. This is something you can also ask your printer, like, how much is my book going to weigh? And they might be able to estimate that based on the type of paperweight they've
Oh.
chosen. And so you just put together a box and you go up to the desk and with 3 different addresses. For me in America, it's like, I'm in California. How much does it take to ship to New York? How much does it take to ship to Toronto? And how much does it take to ship to England? And those are my 3 shipping prices basically for local versus Canada versus international. There's going to be some variation depending on other countries, but you're going to have to give and take a little bit. So put a little extra in there. If you're just doing books, media mail is an option for you in the United States, so look into that. But yeah, fun times. It's just so many things to think about. But the good news is that once you launch a crowdfunding campaign, you can add or change almost anything in it. You can't change the end date. You can't change how much you're asking for, and you can't touch any products that have a person who has already pledged to it. But like if there's a tier or something and you found out that you made a horrible, terrible mistake on like the shipping prices or the description or whatever, as long as nobody has pledged to it, you can change it actually. And so that's nice to know, just a little reassurance if something is gonna go wrong.
If something happens and somebody has pledged to a tier and it has like a fatal error on it, like, oh no, international shipping costs $50 and I accidentally only charged $5, or like something that could be a problem for you down the line, you can also add a limit to that tier, which will effectively close it. Like if it has one backer and that's preventing you from like deleting or modifying, you can just give it a limit of like only 1 copy. And now that tier will be moved to the very bottom of your page to show everybody like this is closed and off limits. You can make a totally new one with the right numbers.
Oh, that's tricky. I hadn't thought about that. Oh, okay. I'm gonna write that down for the future.
I mean, the better option is just to make sure that it's all fully researched, like before it gets launched, and make sure everybody's like looking at all your numbers and catching these things beforehand. But like there are safeguards. There's ways to proceed if there is a mistake.
Yeah, please do your research, but mistakes happen. We all overlook things, like it happens. So there are things that you can change. There's actually also promotional opportunities in that kind of functionality because some creators will add surprise tiers mid-campaign, just to drum up attention during that slow part of the middle of the campaign we were talking about. So, if you have a special commission tier or something like that, maybe you don't launch with that. Maybe you just save that for like the middle and say, there's a new tier. I'm offering commissions, just something little juicy that make people who are on like a more basic level decide to like up their pledge just a little bit to see you get a little bit closer to your goal. And then of course, stretch goals. This is not actually supported within the Kickstarter framework. There's no like form or place that you fill out what your stretch goals are going to be. This is just kind of a thing that has evolved, a practice that has evolved with people making stretch goals. So stretch goals happen once you fund, and they vary depending on what kind of campaign you're doing. For my book Kickstarters, I would offer special guest drawn bookmarks or like a special world building pages for people to look at. I know a lot of other people upgrade the finishing on their book. They might add spot gloss or foil or something fancier with the paper stock. In my dragons Kickstarter, which I did dragons being weird little guys stickers, and every time I hit a stretch goal, I would add another dragon design to the available options that people could choose from. And that's very common with apparel Kickstarters or other kinds of options where like you just add, I'll do a pink one, I'll do a green one, I'll do a yellow one, I'll do, a glittery one. So those are, I don't know that they're always applicable for comic Kickstarters. I do feel like stretch goals should typically benefit people who are getting the main event item, like we were talking about. If it's just, your book, everybody who gets the book should be able to benefit from this stuff. And again, it's just things that you're going to throw in the box that don't cost a lot extra. You don't have to overthink them too much. Most people are happy to receive anything if it's free. So yeah, just anything that you could put in there that won't increase the weight or the shape of the box is a good consideration for a stretch goal and can compel more people to back your stuff.
One of the things that was actually a stretch goal in my Chirelt campaigns is that even though it is a monochromatic comic, I actually initially set my goal around printing it fully in black and white. And then I had a stretch goal to print it in color if I hit a certain amount of money or like a certain amount of pledges, which would kind of justify the increased cost of printing it. Just because there was that little bit of like marker tonality to it that I thought it would be nice to print. Maybe not mandatory because like it's so muted that you could absolutely read it fully desaturated in black and white and it would still flow just fine. But color was like a fun little extra that I thought would be decently suited to being a stretch goal.
I never even thought about that. Like, even with like considering how Ghost Junk always starts with colored pages in the beginning of our books, and that being a stretch goal, that's really cool. Huh. I'm doing so many learnings. So now that we've kind of got into the bulk of things, talking about Kickstarters, pre-launch, the tiers and stuff like that, I kind of want to ask, like, what kind of advice do you have for others who are trying to decide whether or not they should start a crowdfunding campaign right now? Others being me specifically. I constantly am on the fence, and I think with a lot of other people too, because to me, Kickstarters or crowdfunding in general is extremely intimidating. Money being the biggest thing, holding that large amount of money, reaching the funding goal, how to decide the tiers, even though we have discussed it. I think when you start to apply it to yourself, like I immediately just start having doubts. So how do you, get around that? What kind of advice do you have for someone, even a shaking chihuahua like I myself, to kind of get over those fears of Kickstarter?
I think one thing that is kind of helpful and it's baked into the model of crowdfunding itself is just the fact that like if like say absolute worst case scenario thing happens and you don't make the goal, like you're just not on the hook and you can try again. Like nobody's going to be charged if you don't meet your funding amount. And if you do end up making a second campaign after the first one, even if the first one like folds for whatever, like we went into it earlier, like things can be canceled within like 10 minutes of launching for like a silly error or something. But even if it like just straight up doesn't meet goal, you can make a second campaign. And oftentimes that second campaign will have all the experience built in from the first one. And now you have that first campaign. Anyone who did back it will still receive update notifications for any more updates that you make on that campaign. It's like a free mailing list now of however many people that is, many of whom will almost definitely back your second campaign, which will give you like a nice big boost immediately. And I have seen it before where like a first campaign won't happen. And then the second one with all the experience taken in from that first attempt just blows it out of the water. So I think honestly it can seem intimidating without having jumped in for the first time. But like as with anything else, the first step is always the hardest. And once you're actually inside kind of seeing how the pieces fit together, like it becomes a lot more manageable and less scary.
Yeah, I think it's my personal opinion that unless you're doing something like you're super obscure, absolutely anyone can get 50 backers. That's I know that's probably not true, but it feels like most people can get 50 backers and most people can get 100 backers. So if you work backwards from there and you say I'm going to get 100 backers on this, like then you can kind of figure out a reasonable goal to print that many books. And I don't know, it's not necessarily, it's something to shoot for at least. And to me, like, you don't know how well you're going to do until you actually do the thing. Because a lot of times we tell ourselves in our heads that like, we're not good enough. Nobody's going to show up for this thing. But every time I do a Kickstarter, there are people who show up that I would have never expected to like actually want my book. I'm just like, who is this person? Where did they come from? Like, I don't know. And it's those types of experiences that keep convincing me, like, yeah, this is actually doable. There's lots of people who are silently reading and watching and waiting to own my books, and I'm just giving them the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, when I was building up to my first campaign with Gerald, I had no way of tracking how many readers I had. I had never installed any kind of analytics software. I didn't have comments. I had no idea how to code a comments section. And so for all that I knew, the most that I was going to get was like a handful of family members and maybe some friends, because like a few people had said, "Oh yeah, you should definitely print a book. I'd love to have it." And I was like, "All right, so if all 5 of you do, that's 5 backers. Great." And I figured I could probably make it to 30 backers. And I was like, okay, if each of those 30 people is going to spend about, my book was $15, so like 15 plus maybe 10 to another 15 in shipping. If each of those 30 people gives me $30, I'm terrible at mental math, so like there's a number in there that isn't like insanely high. I was like, okay, if I can make it to that number, then like I could probably make I could probably make 30 books and it won't cost a crazy amount of money. So I kind of structured the very beginning of my campaign around that. I contacted some like print on demand places that could do teeny tiny minimum orders, where I was like, if all I need is this many books, how much do those actually cost? And a lot of the numbers, once I started looking into it, were like not as scary as I thought that they were going to be. And I did have a plan for like, like what do I do if things actually do end up a bit bigger than I think they will be. So I contacted some other printers that did like offset and stuff like that for larger quantities of books. And in the end, I ended up very glad that I did, because I ended up needing to print over 200 of them. And like, it was one of those, I could not have predicted how many people were going to jump onto that campaign. Like, it just was not, I had no way to know. And it surprised me. I feel like a lot of them came from Kickstarter itself, because I focused my campaign so heavily on like reaching new readers, and all of my campaign text was kind of written from the perspective of like, okay, if somebody has never heard of my comic before and they're seeing it for the first time ever, how do I make the best possible first impression? And Kickstarter itself, in my opinion, is most valuable as like a marketing tool. Like, in each of my campaigns, half of my backers discovered me through Kickstarter. Actually, in some of them it was more than half. Like, they didn't know me. They found me through Kickstarter's own discovery tools. And I think that in itself is like invaluable, because if you have a readership that can provide you at least an early boost, then the crowdfunding campaign itself and like the hype that you're driving, like making you really push that marketing for that long, like that will keep the growth happening. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I also think that a lot of the comics Kickstarter audience has no idea what a webcomic is. They're just used to buying comics. So it's completely normal for them to spend $10. It feels like in a webcomic format, like, when would you ever get $10 from a random reader just to like read the next 24 pages of your comic? You wouldn't necessarily. But it's a different culture, and if your stuff looks appealing and you're getting like a lot of initial interest, those algorithmic things that are built into Kickstarter can drive a lot of new audiences to you. So you just kind of have to give it a shot and see what happens.
Which is like the scariest part.
But you can do it.
But I did want to ask, what actually happens if you have trouble funding, or if you do actually fail your campaign after all of this hard work?
Well, it won't feel very good.
No, it does suck. It's like, especially if you're not sure you're going to fund, it's like getting down to the wire, and you're just not sure. I've been there like a couple times with the Kickstarters I've done for Somnolus, and it feels like crap. Like, every emotion in my body is just like, why can't it be over? And it does happen. Sometimes the reality is you might not fund the first time. And a lot of people, but it's not over, you still have that mailing list. You still can try again if you want to. A lot of projects fund after people scale down their goals or looked at different printers, different print on demand things for now. And you might also look at how your outreach was handled because, social media doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. Maybe some things were a little confusing about what you were offering. It wasn't really clear that you were offering a book or that there was a time limit on it, or just a lot of things that, maybe it was hard to share. It was hard for people to say, hey, go back this for some reason. So that's when you reach out to your friends and your peers and you just say, hey, what can I tweak to make this better the second time around? What would make this more understandable? What would make my tiers more compelling? Just a lot of things after you've done like the eat a gallon of ice cream and cry a little bit. You're allowed to cry a little bit. It's okay. But it's not the end. It's not the only thing that you can always try again. You can always try again.
And people will not remember your failure within like a month. Actually, even less than that, really. Like the internet moves on so quickly. At most, maybe like somebody will mention it as part of an inspiring story. Like, wow, look at this campaign that's like succeeding incredibly. Like they failed once and then they tried again. Isn't that awesome? That's how I think about it when I see that that's happened to someone else. And I think it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think it also puts the fire under like the people who did back your first campaign to be like, oh, I can't take this for granted now because this book might not actually happen unless I do my part to kind of share it around and give it a little more support. I just think there's a lot of people who are just kind of ignorant of the process and just think that comics come out of thin air. But once they realize that there is a need and they can do something to help you succeed, so many people will step up to do that. And I think that's really encouraging and inspiring to know that you have that kind of audience who really wants you to succeed and wants to hold your book in their hands and say, yeah, I own that cool book. And yeah, it's good. I think it's a really good feeling. I love doing Kickstarters, even when I hate doing Kickstarters, but it's a process that I think gets easier over time. And the more successful campaigns that you do, sometimes you can just start with little small campaigns. Like I did a sticker campaign. I was asking for, a couple $100 or something just so I could print some dragon stickers. And people turned out and I ended up raising like $200 or $2,400, like just for stickers. And that was just like, wow, I can do something if I put my mind to it. So sometimes just starting with a small campaign can also help you boost that confidence.
Kickstarter itself has had some initiatives in the past to kind of encourage creators to launch things like that, like smaller scale campaigns. I'm not sure whether they did it this year, but for a few years in like January or February, kind of early in the year, they would have this initiative called the Make 100 thing where you could set a campaign just to make 100 copies of a thing. It didn't really matter what the thing was. It could be like stickers or pins or like just anything that 100 copies could be made of. And if you made a campaign within that like special initiative period, you could get special extra promotion from Kickstarter. Like you'd appear on their like front page and stuff like that. And I think it was just a neat way to kind of like encourage creators to be like, not everything has to be like a massive, like we're looking for $1 million to sell like thousands of games or something. It doesn't always have to be huge. Like sometimes you can just do something on like a lower scale to like test the waters or just to do something that's a little experimental that you're like, well, the focus on this isn't really to like succeed like crazy or make a ton of money, like just to make something and yeah, share it with people.
And I think all of the experiences and stuff like that is still valuable, like regardless. Like it's still information that you're gathering for marketing or like how well your comic's kind of doing, what your presence is and stuff like that, reevaluating stuff. But I think all of it, regardless of the outcome, is just, it's important. And I don't know, this kind of is revving me up. I don't know when this episode is going to be released exactly, but maybe I will be doing a Kickstarter.
Do it.
Yes. We need that perfect irony.
I kind of do. Because it is exciting, and it sounds like, when it's over and all of that effort, kind of comes together and you have something physical in your hands, or even just the information, it does feel like it's worth it. And I like that you've also said, Thane, that it's also a marketing tool, because Kickstarter has its own kind of thing built in there, and own audience, and it seems like there's a lot of different ways to use crowdfunding in general. So this is actually exciting. I'm scared, but a little excited.
You can do it.
And I think with that note, that is an absolute chicken salad Caesar wrap. I've been Crispy, and you can find my comics at ghostyoungsickness.com and lunarblight.com.
And I've been Delphina. You can find my webcomic at zombulus.com.
And I've been Verathane, and you can find my comics at trevalt.sevensmith.net or witchwoodcomic.com.
Campaign start. Gonna launch a campaign. God.
Thanks for listening to Screen Tones. Subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to be notified of new episodes. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at ScreenTonesCast.